I'm Honeyshuckleex.
I'm Sackbot Barbecue.
And I'm Giggleklutz. And this is our second annual
Outer
Wilds
August!
Can you tell we didn't practice that?
No, we did it on the fly, just for you. Fly. Anyway, here's our... No, there are no flies. There are...
Me to the moon?
Oh boy. This is gonna be an episode about...
Time. And a hell of a time it will be.
Where are we beginning, even? When are we beginning, even?
Don't do that. Don't start with it. It's gonna get confusing enough as it is. Alright.
Yeah, let's just start at the basics, and it will gradually unravel from there.
Right, but first things first, of course. This is an Outer Wilds episode. If you have not played Outer Wilds, and you're a video gamer at all, play Outer Wilds. The episode can wait. You might binge a whole bunch of them afterwards, but go play it. You deserve to play Outer Wilds for the first time unspoiled. Don't shortchange yourself. Go do it.
Yeah, it's like if you listen to this episode, go play Outer Wilds and get distracted and don't come back to listen to this episode for like a year. If you post a comment on that, I will be proud.
Yes, absolutely. Meanwhile, this might be one of our least spoilery episodes in a lot of ways, so...
But at the same time, that also means we're not going to be giving as much context.
That's true. We're not going to slow down and wait for you to catch up, so... Know what you're doing. This is this is for people who have played Outer Wilds. Alright, that's out of the way. There are no content warnings for this episode.
Confusion. Content warning confusion.
Yeah, actually, yeah, probably. Alright.
If you're scared of time, I don't know why you clicked this.
Yeah, no kidding. Alright, the quagmire, we don't want to talk about what time is, because that is like a bigger question and a bigger philosophical quagmire than I'm interested in discussing today, so let's start by talking about how we as humans measure time.
You know, one of the most immediately obvious indications of time and its passage is, you know, the cycle of day and night.
Which is caused by the rotation of the Earth facing and turning the surfaces facing and turning away from the sun.
Yeah, it's like it creates this obvious cycle that all sorts of facets of, you know, life on Earth respond to. Makes sense to ground it as a sense of time for
human beings and other Earthlings living.
I want to give an estimation that the majority of life on Earth understands what day and night is.
Right. So it makes perfect sense for Earthlings to measure time this way. The thing is all of that completely falls apart the minute you try to talk to any entity that's not from Earth.
Like, let's say even, like, our closest neighbor possible, pretty much, would be, like, the International Space Station. And even then, it starts to break down as they're orbiting Earth faster than a day.
Right, but at least they have the anchoring of having spent time on Earth to know what that's like. Their body was, you know, you don't get to go up to the International Space Station as a child. You already have an understanding of day and night and how Earthling life works on Earth before you get to go out there. So that in itself, just the measuring of time being very Earth-centric, the way Earthlings, humans in this case, talk about it, conceive of it, great. But then, what does that do when you're trying to do sci-fi? Especially, but any fictional place that isn't Earth.
So, yeah, the whole thing about, you know, time as we measure it is based off the Earth, but what if space? What if Mars, or another solar system, or just space in general that you don't situate any of it next to a planet or whatever, or you just hop between a bunch of different places. It's like keeping track of a timescale for all of those.
Becomes a huge problem. Really, even just from the space station, I mean, you know, International Space Station, we've divided Earth into time zones. So even Earthlings themselves are not experiencing the same time at the same time, which is like, okay, great. So how do we write the records? How do we talk about these things? And the thing is in fiction, mostly we don't. We just fictionalize an Earth-centric system on top of whatever space things are happening.
Yeah, it's like, can you really expect your fans to keep up with... If people here on Earth have trouble with time zones, if you have to start establishing time zones on planets that don't even have the same sun as ours...
And this isn't even touching on time dilation, which can have an extreme angst factor if you want to play with it, but the ramifications are extreme.
True. So, normally, Earth time is just stuck on other things. And in this case, that's kind of true for Outer Wilds too.
If you're familiar with it, you'll know the detail of, the time loop lasts approximately 22 minutes. Whose minutes are those?
Well, ours.
They're ours. The player, who is a human Earthling, it's 22 minutes on Earth. But we're expected to empathize with Hatchling, a Hearthian. And Timberhearth is a terrestrial kind of planet. It's one we could imagine living on. It's got grass, it's got trees, it's got flowing water, it's got geysers. Things catch on fire, just like they do here. But they don't seem to measure time the same way we would if we lived there. The time loop is 22 minutes. But it's 3 full days plus a little bit of what we would consider Hearthian time. If a Hearthian day is from sunrise to sunrise, say, a time loop is before first sunrise, 3 full days, and then the sun explodes just before it comes over the edge of the village horizon, which is in a valley. So make of that what you will. That plays a part in it too, because visibility matters for these measurements. But I was playing this morning, and I sat, I forget, at some place, and tried to watch the sun come up as it was going to explode to see where from in the village you can watch the explosion. You can't. It explodes just out of sight. Would be dawn of day 4. That would mean that by the way Earthlings calculate days, a Hearthian day would be about 7 Earthling minutes.
And to call back to something we've noted in the terminology the Hearthians use when they're talking to you about time for a little bit is the whole tutorial that takes place with an indeterminate amount of time that will likely include more than one Hearthian day they just blanketly refer to as launch day. How seriously should I take that?
If we're taking it super seriously, which we don't outside of this little thought experiment, it's reasonable to say that, okay, so Hearthians don't consider a day the same way we do. What's a day to a Hearthian? Well, apparently it is several days of Timberhearth by Earthling standards, because every time you talk to anybody on Timberhearth, they're like, oh, I thought it was your launch day. Even if the sun has risen and set several times.
Nobody ever tells you you're late.
Right, which means that maybe what we consider a day may be closer to what they think of as a week, or a season, or something like that. It's never explained. I don't want them to ever explain it. We're just having fun with the weirdness that is trying to talk about time, and how we define time, and how we think about time, and how that plays out in this video game that has creatures on different planets and time loops. And we're communicating with people who are anchored in measured time. In numbers. That's a lot.
So, it's this kind of thing where we're running with this as a thought experiment, because thinking about what day would mean to them is just had all those thoughts about it just now, but it's probably just the developers picking the nearest available English term to have them roughly explain what's supposed to be going on. Kind of the same way why the time loop is Earth minutes.
Because that makes a heck of a lot more sense than somehow the Nomai, who this is all translated into language that the Nomai would also understand, just happen to have the same kind of measurement of time that we do, which the only plausible reason they would do that is if they originated on Earth also, which I don't need that as my headcanon. I don't necessarily even want that as my headcanon.
This distinctly looks like a universe where, humans, or at least their planets, don't need to be there.
Nope, not even a little bit. I just really loved playing with the questions in my brain about relating to someone from a planet like mine, but they relate to time completely differently than I do. That's fascinating to me. But it's sidestepping, of course, the story. First, before we move on to how the time loop measurement impacts choices and feelings and gameplay, let's think for just a second what other kind of measurements of time people could have, because I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, because it's what would time be like on Brittle Hollow if they were developing their own time system independently? Being underground, do you need to have time that matches the surface at all?
It's there's some means of taking looks up at the surface from Brittle Hollow, so it's they could theoretically have a more conventional day measurement, but at the same time, it's it's not practical.
Yeah. And the big one that baffles me is, like, if you were developing a localized time for Giants Deep, what on earth would you do?
Like, because I don't know if a lot of people actually realize it when you're actually playing the game, but, like, Giants Deep doesn't have day and night, it just has cloud cover.
Yeah, the light level remains consistent until the sun dies.
It's a pretty consistent, almost Twilight. It's not quite feeling like Twilight. It feels more like a storm in the middle of the day than it does Twilight. It's certainly not direct light.
Yeah, it gives a very strong feeling like the light is being broken up and distributed evenly across the planet.
Which, of course, it is. There's no equivalent in our world or our physics, I think, where an entire planet would feel like the same no matter what that way. But it's an interesting thing that they did, and because of the cloud cover, you cannot see the sky. You cannot see the sun, so you can't judge it by that at all. Meanwhile, there is no solid ground. The solid bits are floating on water.
They regularly get shot out to the planet's upper atmosphere and come back down.
But at random. That doesn't happen on a pattern. Well, it might if you go out far enough and look long enough, but not a embodied, easily discernible, useful for measuring time kind of way.
Like, I didn't even know that it wasn't actually consistent until we watched a speedrun during GDQ, and they were like, look, we do Giants Deep first because of the RNG of the islands getting launched into space.
Confirmed. So, I don't know. We didn't come up with a good consensus. I have no idea. I would hope someone more brilliant than me would come up with a time scheme that works, but really you'd probably just have to pull one from someplace else and use independent measuring of time.
Yeah, we're lucky that the Nomai were such a developed civilization when the clan of them that arrived in the relevant solar system likely just brought their own time when they arrived anyway.
Pretty positive they did.
You know, if Giants Deep had a reliable moon, I could honestly see that causing an impact on time because of, like, tidal forces. But the thing is that Giants Deep doesn't have a permanent moon, it just has a visiting moon, and that could wreak havoc on tides.
Which would make it even less predictable for time. And what do tidal forces do if you don't have surfaces for them to bump into? You know?
I don't know.
Exactly. It's like, it's just... I love this. I love thinking about the physics of what would happen on Giants Deep and how you would measure time there.
So there's gotta be some reoccurring process. It's like, what, do you just pick up some stray particles, shove them into an hourglass, and then base the rest of your time off that?
Sure, as long as you did it in a unified fashion and everyone agreed, but...
Where were you getting sand, really?
I don't know, there's rocks there. You can get sand enough if you rub the two of them together for long enough.
Let's not get into the question of, did they have trees there before the Nomai got there? Did the Nomai bring the trees? I don't know.
I mean, I'm pretty sure there's reasonable evidence that they brought them other places we find them, so at the very least they had trees with them, I think.
I think there are trees on the vessel, so yeah.
So anyway, part of the point of bringing this up is that it's too much to get into, so...
Right.
Let's head this off now.
Okay, but anyway, yes, there are plenty of thought experiments abound to thinking about the measuring of time in the Outer Wild solar system. Feel free to indulge on your own time. We've had a lot of fun doing it. So, on to the next, and, other point.
Time as gameplay. Time makes very weird gameplay. Most of the time, I think that time as a mechanic is handled pretty poorly. Oh, you gotta rush to do this thing. Like, why? You gotta rush to do the thing, because I told you to.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have any better way to build tension. It's a lazy way of building tension.
Yeah, like, it's different when it's like a short, 30-second time challenge in, Mario, get to the end of this thing to get the star. That's fine.
Or just see how much of X objective you can get done in time limit.
But sometimes it's just arbitrary and doesn't fit. And then you got Outer Wilds, where the entire premise of the game is that you have 22 minutes. Why doesn't that feel terrible?
It sounds like it would be terrible.
It does.
Yeah.
But it limits the stake, for sunken cost fallacy. The most time you can invest into any time loop is 22 minutes.
It's like there is a guaranteed out point to wherever you end up. If you make your way all the way down to the bottom of Giant's Deep, you are no longer obligated to figure out how you're going to get back out.
The longest you could be stuck down there is 22 minutes minus travel time.
Yeah, and, like, shorter if you decided you wanted to go drown.
Right, that's always an option. You just use up all your fuel and then you'll use up all your oxygen. They don't give you the option to take your suit off, so...
Well, actually, when you're in the water, it uses water as propulsion. So you won't use your oxygen.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think you
never
even use
noticed
your
that.
fuel underwater because you can't burn it.
Oh. No, you can't. I was trying really hard to do some stuff in Giant's Deep today, and I did not notice that at all. I will have to pay attention next time I play.
Yeah, if I'm wrong, you can call me out on the next episode.
You know, if we test this before the episode's done, we can, like, maybe make a meme about it.
That would be awesome.
Hey, editing me. Put a meme right here. Wow, that's a good meme. You did a good job with that one. Did you guys know we put memes in these episodes?
Which, if you don't listen to the whole episode, you're not going to hear us say that either, so... So anyway, what does a time loop do for you, though? Why is it good game mechanic? Aside from, there's no sunken cost fallacy. You shouldn't be afraid to try whatever it is you want to try.
Well, like you were saying, where, like, it breaks all your investment into 22 minutes, right? The more you play, the more you learn about all the smaller time restrictions. Like, you learn about the sun station, you learn about pathway to the Brittle Hollow Observatory.
In the high energy lab.
The high energy lab. All these, like, little timed things. Like, most of them being, like, oh, you have to get here before a certain time, and then, like, I think, like, one of the big exceptions is, like, the Quantum Moon Tower, where it's, like, you have to wait until the very end for it to go through the black hole.
Oh, that, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Quantum Tower on Brittle Hollow.
Mm-hmm.
Right, rather than the tower on the Quantum Moon was what I was confused with. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's not time dependent. You can do everything with it no matter when you arrive.
Right, but I was very confused because my brain didn't go right there, right then. But, you know, it happens.
Mm-hmm. So when you have time as, like, your central mechanic and your central maximum investment, breaking it into smaller pieces doesn't seem like as big of a deal. Unless you're, I guess, struggling with the high energy lab, which it's easy to struggle with the high energy lab.
Thank you for saying that out loud.
You need a lot of high energy if you want to get in there.
Yeah, the time restriction on that is honestly kind of ridiculous. Because, like, if you get there too early, you have to wait. But then, like, once you're there at the right time, you gotta rush and not get poked by cactus.
Because cactuses, ouch.
Cactus is not on your side.
No. So, any more about the time loop mechanic?
Should we talk about how, like, the time inherently brings that existential dread, or do you think we covered that enough, like, last year?
I don't know. I think it's okay.
Well, then, there's one thing to know gameplay-wise, like, you have 22 minutes, and another thing to be immersed, and then knowing you're going to die in 22 minutes.
Yeah, but it uses that to encourage you not to fear death, at least of hatchling. They're going to be just as fine as they were last loop.
You know, the sun exploding is the key to the time loop and the driving part of the game's story, what's moving you forward, and it kind of physically reaches out to pull you back into it every 22 minutes. Regrounds you in the bigger picture to reorient yourself.
Yeah,
Well stated, yeah.
Like, it is kind of important to, like, look at your ship's log and see what kind of progress you've made, and, like, having to do that fairly regularly feels nice. You can kind of see if you're making progress. Are those little exclamation marks disappearing? Is something in color now?
What new leads do I have from that last expedition?
More games should come with a conspiracy board.
I'm all for it. I love that, actually. That's pretty great, especially if you have to make the connection yourself.
Yeah, I could see that being a more involved mechanic.
But anyway, are we good for time?
I think so. I think, that's about the energy I have for today. This has been Collab Not Multiplayer. I'm Honeyshuckleex.
I'm Sackbot Barbecue.
And I'm Giggleclutz. Goodbye!
Bye!
Bye. See you next time.